Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Imperfect podcast. I'm your host, Kirsten Pfeiffer, and today I am joined by the lovely January Donovan, who is a national speaker, entrepreneur, #1 best-selling author, mindset and skill set trainer, and self-worth strategist. She is also the founder of the Women's School, which we're going to talk a lot about today. And she has developed a unique program that trains women to overcome their self-worth battles by rewiring their worth through rewiring their brain. She has coached women for over 20 years on mastering the skills they need to expand their dreams and cultivate a life of meaning. Welcome, January. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Kirsten. I'm so grateful to be here. Excited about this topic. Excited to be able to dig a little bit deeper with you. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people may have seen this on the Instagram, but we did a live Instagram, and it was just a short little chat. But I remember just like realizing I could talk to you for hours. So I'm really excited to have a little bit of like a longer version of that conversation because you have so much amazing wisdom to share. Would you like to just get started by telling us a little bit more about yourself and how you came to create the Women's School?
Yeah. The Women's School was really born for me out of my own need for training. I felt like growing up, I felt like I was just looking for role models, for someone to show me, how do I show up as a woman? How do I make decisions? How do I talk to a boy? How do I get rid of toxic friendships or relationship? And I felt like I made a lot of choices because I just didn't know how to make a choice. I didn't know I didn't have the skills to. And so much of, I think, my wound became the compass to this work. And it really brought me to this one moment where I met I would say my mentor, who said, January, let's design you. And I just started laughing. I was at the bottom of the barrel. I felt like I was just a stressed and anxious, young girl who wanted to do something beautiful with her life, but had no idea how. And so for 3.5 years, I met with her and she said, let's design the January Donovan that you want to be. You want to be kind? This is your homework. You want to be, simple, or what are all these different things? And so it was revolutionary. I didn't understand it while I was in it. My first homework, Kirsten, was to get rid of comparison and competition. That was my first homework. And actually, it was make my bed every day, get up for morning prayer and meditation every day. And so it went in that order. She's like, you can't even, do anything besides you make your bed because you want to be accomplished. It's the first thing you do in the morning. And the third thing was that I felt kind of insecure about certain women. And it was really insecurity because I wanted to be somebody like them and I didn't know how. And so she said, January, write down all the names of the women you feel sort of like just threat. That was the word she used. I did it. And for the next 6 months, I had to study them. I had to emulate them. I had to compliment them in my thoughts. And what she did was rewire my brain out of comparison and competition that actually made me feel inferior, insecure, and actually train my brain to have a habitual response for admiration for other women. That changed the way I actually saw my friendship. It changed my own level of insecurity. And so I look back on that and I realized, wow, she really in so many ways saved my heart from toxicness, because when I look back, I realize every woman that I met became sort of the source of inspiration and no longer a source of comparison and competition. And it was because she rewired my brain. So it came simply because somebody showed me how. And so the Women's School is really a how-to school, because I think there's a lot of empowerment as we talk about it. It has become a buzzword, but we need the depth of training. And what I found was what she did with me was training. What she did with me was not you can do it, I believe in you, you're enough, you can go for it. She said, no, what's the discipline behind what you want? Wow. Nobody wants to talk about that. So I spent the next 20 years really developing training for women that I didn't have. And here we are, 8 children later, and beautiful marriage that I think I would have never had I not had training on conversation skills, meaningful connection, all these things that I think I would say that every woman deeply desires: a meaningful, inspiring life, inspiring relationship. And so the Women's School is just a how-to school. And what we offer is that, how do we design every part of our life? Not based on what everyone thinks, but based on our value as unconditional.
Yeah. Well, and I love that, because I think that we've have like half of the equation of like, you can do it, like, and kind of just like changing that narrative, like that you do have infinite worth and you can accomplish your dreams. But like you said, then we're not really empowering people with the tools to do that. And what I've found in my life is it's like, okay, like I can do it. I can do all these big things. It almost amplifies the pressure because it's like, okay, well, I'm supposed to be able to do all these things and reach my dreams, but no one's told me how to do that. So then it becomes like I have to carry this weight myself, and like God forbid I mess up, which like we all do. Then you feel like, for me at least, it solidifies that like I did something wrong, and this shame spiral, and like I'm not enough, and imposter syndrome, and all those things that when you strip it away, it's like all linked to your worth. And doing that training to rewire your brain so that you know, even if I fall, like even if I don't like succeed in this thing that I'm trying to do, that has nothing to do with my worth and my capabilities. So, and that's kind of, we were talking about this a little bit before we started, like that's been a big part of my struggle. And I've talked about this a lot on my podcast. It's called Imperfect for a reason, because I am a recovering perfectionist. And Brene Brown, in her research, she does a lot of shame research, and she talks about perfectionism as a defense mechanism against shame. If we can figure out how to rewire our brains, then it saves us from a lot of this shame and these lies that we believe. I've done a lot of research on the women's school, and one of the things that you guys talk about on your website is that it includes skills, scripts, and strategies to becoming a whole new woman. So on this, like, what are these scripts and why are scripts so important?
Yeah, before I can answer the question, I think I would just sort of maybe backtrack a little bit and say, kind of identify the three main crises that I think women are facing today, because I think that will help understand why we need the scripts. And we identify this in the women's school is that, number one, there's a lack of preparation. We go to school to be a teacher, to be a surgeon, and all the different professions, but there's no training. When I say training, it's skill set. It's managing our mind, manage our home. It's managing our relationship. There's no life of preparation for women today. You can't go to school for decision-making skill, for boundaries, because you can read 100 books on boundaries and not know how to actually draw boundaries because you have no script. Yeah. Roadblock number two, which I think is a crisis, is the irrational demands on women. So the expectation is that you have to be perfect. You have to prove and please everyone else. And your value is based on what we call the poisonous P. It's possession, power, your position, your popularity, and your perfection. So women feel valued or devalued based on these metrics. Our metrics are not based on our unconditional worth, which means if my kids are not perfect, I must not be good, mom. And so if I don't show up perfect in an audition, or I say some mistake, then we collapse failing with being a failure. We collapse a woman with more money, more fame, more of, better bodies, as us being devalued. So that's an irrational demand, I truly believe, because we can't expect women to, first of all, have our worth attached to outside of us. We have to value who we are apart from anything external. Our DNA is unique to us. Our personalities, our wounds, the combination of where we are in this time in history is so unique. We are an irreplaceable human woman being. Yeah. So we cannot equate our value based on our power, our perfection, our body, all the external things. So that's an irrational demand. And I think number three, we base right now, I would say, women in a very fractured version of women. When we think of, okay, what makes us, perfect, right? Let's just say, well, it's your achievements, it's your body, and not every part of us. We focus so much on, I would say, if you look at the women's school, it's a wheel, and it's got your self-image, the opinion of yourself. It's got your friendship, your health, which is composed of mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, your contribution, intimacy. And so we only kind of focus on two or three. And we realize, well, what about my environment? What about my friendship? What about intimacy? All that allows me to actually be fulfilled. But if I'm only focusing on two parts, it's like me being, only valuing, 2/3 of my life. And so we feel sort of fractured. So where the scripts come in is that, where the skills, scripts, and strategies come in is that we can't fight, you know, expected perfection without proper preparation. And to aspire only for parts of who we are to be valued. So the way we counteract is that we have to fight the battle for women, and we have to say, we have to equip women with skill set. We can't just say, go be healthy and be fit and not teach her how to clean her kitchen, not teach her how to make a quick meal, how to order her life, how to manage her home, manage her mind, how to show up. I tell women all the time, does anybody tell us that 7% is words, 38% tonality, and 55% body language? And yet we're supposed to have a relationship. We need skills, and that's what we teach in the women's schools. We teach micro skills and macro skills, because you can't go to school for gratitude skills. You can't go to school for resilience skills, and that's what we offer. So that's the skills. And I think number 2 is the strategies. We have to be strategic. Like, we have to study the world, the irrational demand, what is expected of women, and we have to be so strategic and say, well, I don't have to put up with that. What are the 3 concrete strategies? You don't build a business without a strategy. Well, we don't just say, well, this is me. I'm just going to show up by default, whatever. No, we have to be strategic about how we develop every part of our life. I've built a multi-million-dollar business with a mom with 8 children, a thriving marriage. It's not because I'm trying to impress everybody. It's because somebody showed me how to actually take care of every part of my life. It requires a lot of training. It requires a lot of discipline. And so it requires a lot of strategy. How do I do this without compromising my health, my marriage, my home? I can't just say, great, I've built this incredible, movement of women, and my home is in shambles, that my kids are falling apart. It has to be integrated. And so we have to be strategic. That's number 2. So skills, strategy, and then the script part. And the script part is very important, because we become what we think about. Words become flesh. So the things that we think about are so habitual, Kirsten. So I tell women, before, when you first learn how to drive, you have to think about driving. You're like, okay, I'm going to back up, we're still sort of in our conscious brain. When you think of typing, when you first learn it, you have to go A, B, C. Yeah. But now if I tell you where's letter J, you probably don't know where it is, but your finger knows it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just take that to all the negative limiting beliefs that we have. What about self-criticism? A woman passed by and she goes, oh, gosh, I wish I had her body. We don't even know it. We say it. We make a mistake. Oh, I'm awful. It's so habitual, just like you learn driving initially, and now you don't even think. You can text while you're driving. All the things we speak about ourselves are literally wired and hardwired into our subconscious brain. We say it before we even are aware of it. Mm-hmm. It's literally a bad habit. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. Right. It's an addiction. Yeah. It's like how do we replace it? Just like you would replace it, you have to rewire your brain. It's like learning a new language, right? Mm-hmm. If you're learning French, you have to repeat it over and over again. And so in the women's school, we have a new language that serves the heart of women and gets rid of all the language that no longer actually serves who she can be for the world. So that's why it's about rewiring our brain, because you can't just also, you can't also just have this affirmation without skill set. I hear that all the time. We just have to be, I am good, I am bold. Well, you can, but if you don't have the skills actually to create a plan, to follow through with a plan, to have hard conversations, to know what questions to ask. You can tell yourself you're bold all day long. You need the skills to match it. And so that's why we talk about the skills, scripts, and strategies, so that we can rewire both our mindset and our skill set, so that we can fight the battles in front of us, and we don't have to be a victim of everybody saying, well, you're only worthy if and when.
Right.
I mean, this is a huge mountain we have to fight. I mean, climb for women together.
Absolutely. I think we don't even realize these scripts. Some of us have been built since childhood, if something is the norm for you, you don't even realize it. Like, I was diagnosed with OCD when I was in 4th or 5th grade. So I was like a little kid. I didn't know that my way of thinking wasn't healthy. I thought that that's what was normal, and I think that now I it's a constant battle. I've learned how to integrate new scripts so that I don't beat myself up. But, you know, and I think I've come a far way, but there are times where, you know, even yesterday, like I messed something up and something didn't turn out like how I thought it was going to. And I actually had no control over the situation, but somehow like I started to believe this lie that I could have controlled it. I could have done something better. And then it just spiraled backwards. And I haven't dealt with that in a while. So I kind of surprised myself with that. And so what would you say in terms of like, you make all this progress, but then I'm sure that you've seen this a lot in the women's school too. Like, what would you say when you feel like you've made this progress and then you still can kind of fall back into those bad habits, so to speak?
That's a great question. And that's exactly what it is. It's just a bad habit. So in the women's school, we just call it, you know, sort of your back pocket script. So when I was single, even, Kirsten, I had a script book. Literally, I had an index card. And because I needed to write it over and over again, writing is wiring because you're repeating it over and over again. And so what we want is to obviously want to replace that language, but when you're in that situation, let's just say you're in a situation where things didn't work out. Then you already know when things don't work out, this is your script. Life is happening for me, not to me. I'm detached from the outcome. I harvest from my failure. And so it's automatic. And there's no way around being aware and say, okay, I'm in that space. I know what to say. And so I think the more you have your back pocket scripts in every situation, it could be somebody's making fun of you. What do you say? You know, everyone is a critic. It's part of success. Yeah. You know, the greater my success, the bigger the critic. So it's having these knee-jerk reaction of back pocket scripts so that you're not a victim to that situation. Because how did that come about to begin with? I'm a mom. I've got preteens. The attacks are coming everywhere. It's in social media, it's on TV, it's on friendships. I can't police everything. So let me give you an example. You know, right before my children go to school, I give them scripts when somebody makes fun of them because I don't know what's going on. And sure enough, my daughter came home one day and she's like, oh, this boy was making fun of me. And how many times does it happen when a mom actually isn't equipped to equip her child to know what to say? Perhaps your mom, because most of us were not trained to say when you start to feel, you know, like you have to control everything, what do you say? So I remember working with her and I said, you know, so what did you say to her? You know, Ina, were you upset about it? I was kind of just digging in. It's like, no, Mom, no. His opinion of me is not my opinion of me. Wow. But it was because we were training it. But here's the reality. Who's training the parents to train the children? To equip them when somebody makes fun of them or when they feel like they've failed, what do they say to themselves? Because that's when the wiring begins. And that wiring begins and the parents don't know to police it. And it's a lot because there's, you know, I have a lot of children. I have to manage the conversation. I have to constantly, you know, re-script them. We have a script book in our kitchen and literally I have to constantly re-script them because I have to prepare them because this is the reality. And so you know, we can't blame the parents. You can't blame your mom, your dad. This wasn't the way even the world has massively changed. And so what we're going to introduce then is the replacement script because we can't erase unless we replace. So we have thousands of scripts in the women's school because essentially that is the how, right? Because, you know, when you have all these things that are out of your control, what do you say to yourself? You know, I can only control my reaction. I can only control my reaction. So then you just know, okay. So you just whip the scripts out and become so habitual, just like you learn the keyboard. And at first you have to think about it and then it becomes normal and it becomes knowing becomes being by rewiring.
Wow. That's powerful. And that's such a good example. And yeah, my friend, she studies imposter syndrome. She's a PhD student. She has a young baby. And so she's talking about even from a young age, our reactions to our children's behavior wires certain things in their brain. For example, if the baby spills the milk and your natural reaction might be like, oh, and you're not shaming or yelling at the kid, but the kid sees, oh, I knocked something over and my parents had a visceral reaction that wasn't positive. Like, that's a mistake. And so then also she talks a lot about what do we say good job to even? Like, do we say good job when the kid tried really hard, but maybe didn't get like an external, like what the world would say is successful? And so just having that intentional parenting. I'm so inspired. Also, I'm like, I have so many questions for you of like, I'm not a parent yet and I want to be one day. And I'm like 8 kids and it sounds like you're an amazing mother too. I'm like, that's really impressive, like how you handle everything. And I know that's probably a very loaded question of like how you balance so many things. And I know a lot of it probably does come back to the training in the women's school, but what like general advice would you have for someone that is juggling a lot of different projects and kids and family and all those things?
Yeah, so I think my advice is that we have to we have to see ourselves as students of the woman all day, every day for the rest of our life. What that looks like is that we come into, let's just say, you're single or you're dating, you're transitioning to a new season of your life. New season equals new skill set. Otherwise, we risk overwhelm because overwhelm just means underskilled. That's what it is. You're overwhelmed because you don't know probably how to manage your time. You don't know how to manage your mind. You don't know how to manage your emotion. These are just skill set. They are learned. So what I tell women all the time is be a student. Think of your life as an Olympian. This is the Olympics of your lifetime. And so Olympians train every day. They make it part of their life, right? And when they stop training, what do? Your muscles kind of go into atrophy, right? Mm-hmm. If I don't train as a mother, I train. I get up at 4 a.m. to do training. I study. I couldn't do what I'm doing. I couldn't show up peacefully and joyfully and show up at, my team meetings and creative. It requires a lot of training. But when you get to a point, Kirsten, that training becomes a beautiful gift because you realize even the discipline is actually what gives you life because it would be a lot harder without it. So that's what I would say is be intentional about training. And I think make it part of the daily life, scripting, studying, mindset training. That's what I do. I would secondly is that we have to be so intentional about designing every part of our life. We can't live by default. Like if you were going to build a house, you would say, I'd like to design it. I'd like to have a blueprint for my kitchen. I'd like to have it for my living room. Well, we want to do the same thing with our intimacy, our friendship. We want to have meaningful friendship. Well, they just don't happen. We need to be intentional about finding the right friendship. What makes a friendship meaningful? If you want to be a mom someday, like for me, I know exactly what your friends were talking about because that's actually a lot of the Montessori trainings we did, the things you were saying, but I had to study actually. So you want to design every part of your life. And we call that in the women's school, every part of your arena, which where do you go to get that? It's not like we go to school to say, this is how you identify, and self-assess in your self-image. This is how you assess your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health. It's very connected. What I think about impacts my emotion. If I'm worried, my emotion gets anxious, my body actually physically gets tensed up. And spiritually, I'm hijacked. I can't pray. I can't think of purpose. I can't even think creatively. Stress makes us selfish, but not on purpose. And so the second part is very intentionally design every part of our life. And I'd say the third thing is surround ourselves with women or, people, not necessarily women, around us that are training and also intentionally designing every part of their life. Because we want to build a community around us, of women that are students, that we can hold each other accountable. So those are 3 things I would say: training, designing every part of our arena, and then surrounding ourselves with women, a community that are intentionally training and designing every part of their arena. And I think that makes a difference in the world.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I love what you said about really valuing and cherishing the training, because I think as there's been times in my life in like really busy seasons where I am handling a lot of different things and getting up early and preparing for things. And like a big part of my practice as well is like getting up early and journaling and praying as well. And so I think that sometimes in those busy seasons, if I'm being honest, have felt resentful of like, ugh, like why I have so much on my plate, like, ugh, and being not grateful for the fact that that's the result of a fruitful, like full, beautiful life. And a lot of the things that I'm doing, like I get to do, like even this podcast, sometimes I'm like, oh, like I have so much work to do with it. And I'm like, but I love doing it. And so I'm like, why am I being resentful for the training that is required for me to do what I love to do? And same with acting, same with, I can go down the list, but it's like, and then I have to also look back. I think for me, like having gratitude for where I am a lot of times goes back to, and this is why I love journaling, because some of the things that I've prayed for years ago, like I'm living in those answered prayers. And if we're not intentional about that, you can forget like how far we've come and that we actually are living out answered prayers. And so I think that has been something that's really important for me too, is just to have gratitude and for all of it.
I just want to honor you too, honestly, because I see such wisdom in you and such a beautiful soul. It's such a young soul, to be honest. I can't say that I carried that much depth and wisdom when I was perhaps your age, but really, I mean, the fact that you're seeking, the fact that you're growing, the fact that you're here trying to dig deep into this, conversation, the fact that you work so much in helping, women, I mean, that is really a testimony of who you are. And I just think, I want to be able to honor you because I train a lot of women, Kirsten. I do. This is what I've done.
Yeah.
And, to your parents have done great things, the good, the bad, and everything for you to be able to harvest and to me to experience this level of depth and conversation is telling of the work that you've done interiorly. And
Thank you.
so I just want to, honor you and because I see it. I see it because I see women all day long.
Yeah. No, that means a lot. And I think it gets back to what you were saying too, of like surrounding yourself with community. Like so much of where I'm at is because of that. So I also wanted to say like copy and paste. Yes, I completely agree. And like, women like yourself, I am inspired by people like you, and like I am the result of people all kind of pouring into how do we become better? How do we make the world better? How do we become better, like spiritually, mentally, physically, and what you said too of stress is such a big thing. And I was in a car accident and it was terrible. Like obviously I'm not saying I'm grateful for that, but it caused me in retrospect to slow down because there were parts of my health that I was ignoring. And because I was recovering from like, I had neck and back issues and it would give me really bad migraines. And I noticed, because I was in this really sensitive place, that anytime I was stressed, like the migraines would exacerbate. And it really, I think anything that you're handed can be an opportunity for growth, because when I look back, it really taught me to be so intentional about my health to the point where I like had to protect it, because I'm not going to lie. I tend to let my health just like go, like sleeping and all those things. I'm like, oh, I can do it. I can push through. And I ignore these physical ailments that are really the result of stress. So kind of deconstructing and saying like, why am I feeling this in my body? And a lot of times it comes back to like mental and emotional things. And so a bit of a tangent, but like, I think that, first of all, thank you for saying that. That was so sweet. And a lot of it really does come down to what I've learned through like bad experiences. And then also what I've learned through people like you, and the community that I surround myself with.
Oh, it's so, I'll share this with you because I think it's part of our training to sort of bring in sort of the skill set that you were asking earlier. Most women, that are chasing their dreams, when they talk about dreaming, we don't have language for certain things. So a lot of women, in the women's school, when I say what's the difference between a dream and the goal, we wouldn't know. It's not like we go to school for it. Yeah. But I share with you because this is an example of understanding skill set. A goal is something we know how to achieve. We actually can see it. You're like, there's a metric behind a goal. Yeah. A dream is something that excites and scares us, but we don't know how to achieve it. Because in order to achieve something greater than what we see, we have to become greater than who we are. It's like the Wright brothers, thinking about it. Right. They didn't know how to make, they were bicycle mechanics. right? And they had to build an airplane from this. So I share this with your audience because I invite women to dream, but know the distinction between dreaming and goal setting. That's a skill. To dream is to see something with the eyes of faith that has not been yet before. And it excites you and scares you at the same time, but you have no idea how to do it. And why is that important? Because it actually is what leads you to a life of discipline. And this is what goes full circle, is that we train because when we have a vision of where we want to go, like if you were like, okay, I'm going for the gold medal, then dreaming becomes a fuel to a life of discipline.
Wow.
And you've never been there. You don't know what a gold medal is. So you get up, you train every day if you're a gymnast, and that's you. What's the dream? Is it, for women, is it being a singer, being, a doctor, or doing something they've never done before? And so we show up every day because it's the vision that pulls us.
Wow.
And knowing the distinctions of skill set is so important because it's actually what allows us to fulfill the deepest desires, because in some ways our dreams reveal who we're created for.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. And I've never heard it articulated that way. And I resonate a lot with that because I've had this dream to be an actress since I was 6 years old. And I always knew that, and especially as I got older, I knew that I feel like acting was like kind of like the guiding light, but I knew that there was so much more that I wanted to do with that. Like I love acting itself, but I also wanted to have like a platform to help other people. And I wanted to like tell my own stories and write and produce and all these things. And so the dream mixed with like the discipline and the goal setting led me to branch out and do these other things before, the big acting breakthrough. I'm grateful that I've had the opportunity to work professionally as an actress here and there, but it hasn't been to the extent that I've dreamed of since I was a kid yet. And I'm still working towards that. But I've also been able to go down this path of having a podcast and it's just like, I think sometimes I got so stuck and stringent in how I thought it was supposed to look that it prevented me from branching out and doing things like this. And I'm like, thank God, like this journey has led me down these different like windy paths, because now I would have never been sitting and having a conversation with someone like you. And it's really cool when you still keep that dream as the fuel, because that's what inspires me to get up early and work and do all these things, but also realizing like, how can I set goals so that I don't stay locked in a little box of like what we thought things should be.
You are so spot on, honestly, because I think part of also the dream that we teach is a skill of detachment. Nobody kind of talks about it. Because, if you look at successful people, Steve Jobs says you can't, connect the dots. You can connect the dots looking backwards. Mm-hmm. But really, it looks like this. And so there has to be a detachment, even in the pursuit to the dream. Because, people ask me all the time, well, how do you know what the dream is? Well, you don't. You have to take that step forward. And then it reveals itself. Yeah. The dream actually requires you to act in faith and courage. That's why it changes you. Yeah. And so you have to also be ready to detach and pivot as necessary, because you don't know the road to get there. Mm-hmm. And this is why it's so important to understand the skill set necessary, because, in your pursuit of the dream, it doesn't look like that straight line. I mean, that was my road, Kirsten. I have dreamt of the women's school 20 plus years ago. I was in my 20s. I drew it out in the basement of this house that I was, mentoring women, because I saw it and it was so clear. 20 years later, I was still, and I thought it was going to be a physical, room. I didn't think I'd have 8 kids. And so here it was, the dream kept revealing itself, and it became an online school, and it became an online wholeness coaching school for women. So women learn how to design a life that was whole. I would have never, it was just it. So we have to learn these skills of detachment. And, I tell women, I said, we've arrived, at least in the Western world, to a level of freedom that most of, the world hasn't, and I think we have to celebrate that freedom. But that freedom is still conditional. And so what we truly want right now, and what we need to fight for, is interior freedom. That's the new fight. that we are no longer a victim of everything external, that my opinion of you does not no longer matters, that you know your value doesn't ever change, or that the world could be falling apart around you and you are able to see gratitude and hope in spite of it all. That's the freedom that we need, because right now the poverty and the suffering is in our mind, and women are dying a slow death and nobody knows it because they're ruminating an interior conflict that's causing physical illness. I mean, we see it. It's proven now that stress causes all this physical illness. And so I tell women, the new battle is here. The battle for interior freedom. And guess what? You're the first woman you fight for.
Wow. Yeah.
We have to fight for each other, but we first need to fight for ourselves. We fight for our worth. We train ourselves to fight the battle so that we go out there and able to build an army of women who's saying, I'm not comparing, I'm not competing. Yeah. I'm collaborating. I celebrate you. I want you to pursue your dreams. Let's not just live in fluffy, meaningless life. Let's pursue a life of wholeness. Give all that we can and train ourselves as necessary to actually become who God created us to be. To really fully live that. I mean, we hear it, but how? We need the training, Kirsten, and I am committed. I think I will die doing this, and that's what I tell women. I said, I don't need to do this. I still have a 1-year-old, I have an incredible marriage. I'm grateful, but I so ache. I can't sit on a Starbucks line and not hear women unhappy with their bodies, competing, comparing, criticizing other women. I'm like, we can't. She's suffering when she's criticizing other women. Because the same metric she's using to criticize other women is probably the same metric she's using for herself.
Absolutely. It goes back to I remember my mom would say to me when I was a kid, if I was being bullied by someone, she'd be like, oh, they're just jealous of you, or they're not happy and it sounds cliche and it's hard to believe that when you're a kid and when you haven't, developed this interior strength that you're talking about. But it really is when you look back. I mean, there's been times in my life where I found myself less gracious to other people and more so just in my thoughts. And I'm like, why am I feeling bitter towards this person? And a lot of times it's because I'm not feeling centered, and I have gotten in a place in my life where I'm a little off balance. Maybe my relationship with God is not as strong at that time. I'm not praying as much, and it is really slow. It's a few degrees where you start to shift away, and then you're all of a sudden oh wow, why am I feeling this way? It's because you've gotten a little bit off balance. And I think that's always a really telling thing for me when I start to feel less in control of how I'm interacting with other people and my thoughts towards them. It's usually reflective of my thoughts towards myself at that time, And so I think that having that awareness and having that training allows you to be okay, let me get back to my center here. And even in terms of competition, I'm in one of the most competitive industries, if not the most competitive industry. Yeah. And I'm really grateful for the mentors I've had. And, my acting coach once put it of there is only one you, it doesn't matter if the writer writes this role as a brunette Caucasian woman in her 20s. Yes, there are going to be a lot of other women that look like that. And if you've seen La La Land, where Emma Stone shows up and there's a bunch of other girls that look like her. However, each one of those women have a completely different essence that is not Emma Stone. And as a writer myself, there's times when you're writing a character and yes, you imagine these physical things about them, but you also imagine an essence and a personality. And there's certain things that only I can bring to this role in the way that another girl that might look exactly like me is going to bring something completely different. And the only person getting in the way of me booking the role that was meant for me is myself. If I'm not prepared, if I haven't done the work and I haven't done the training to be prepared as an actress. And so my acting coach always said the biggest competition is yourself. And I think you can apply that to anything in life. And what I really liked that you said in the beginning was feeling competition against other women and starting to compliment them in your brains. And something that my friend told me, who was working for her boss, and it was like a really demanding job. She said, when I was starting this new job, her best advice that she gave me was to pray for my bosses every day, because she said it's impossible to be offended when you're praying for someone else. And so I think it applies too, of like, if you're struggling with competition and jealousy, like, start either praying for that person or writing down things you admire about them. Because another thing that just reminded me of, I talked about this on another podcast episode, about like the difference between envy and jealousy, and how a lot of times, like, when you're envious or jealous of someone, it really is just indicating that you want to be somewhere that they are, but you're not. And so instead of seeing that as an opportunity to be like envious of someone, just using that as an opportunity to reach out to them and ask them how they got to where they were, and then like affirm them in that process that they're doing something right. And so I think that no matter what it is that we're talking about, there's always a way to flip it, rewrite the script, so to speak, and find a way to like create unity in all of it.
And that's where the script really comes in handy, because we're just retraining our mind in those moments of, where we feel, because I think it's normal to have sort of maybe feeling of inadequacy, but it's how we react to it. And so having those script, then you can say, oh, I'm just going to learn from this person. There's not, I refuse to compare and compete myself. And you just automatically go to your script of, what can I learn from her? And a lot of women, when I ask them, what do you want? And if you were going to ask, something you'd want, is I want to be confident. That's typically what, women, they don't even say I want to be beautiful, because when they can't even take the image of a thin one, sort of dimensional idea of beauty, that they don't even aspire for, even though women are created for beauty. When we take the limits outside of just the physical, okay? So I'll talk about that in a minute. But women usually say, I want to be confident. Well, where does confidence come from? Nobody, everybody talks, I want to be confident. Confidence comes from competence. Yeah. Think about it. You become a confident actress because you've done your homework, you've trained, you've practiced it. I become a confident speaker if I know how to show up, I know how to manage my thoughts, my words. So to be a confident conversationalist, to be confident in you showing up in the room, simply means that we need to train and build competency skills. Mm-hmm. And so we have false assumptions carried in through our high school that she's just confident. She's not confident. Yeah. What we really are saying is, I like the freedom she possesses because she knows how to show up. That's actually the deep desire of the woman from the fruit of confidence. They're just free. Because if you're a confidence woman, when you know your script, when you know how to show up, you're free. You're not afraid. You're not kind of, worried about how you show up. You've done your 10,000 hours of competency to become confident. Goes back to discipline and training. And so we give women in the women's school a confidence formula. I'm like, let's not talk about this empowerment confident that does not have the depth of training behind it. So we give them a formula and say, you want to be confident? Here's your confidence. Competence plus consistency, and you give yourself an accountability. And then confidence is not a blanket statement. It's I could be confident in the way I dress, but actually not confident in the way I speak. So a lot of times we create this sort of blanket narrative. No, let's take it apart. So women actually are developing the tender responsibility to develop competency without feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm just so insecure. And we create this, our language is in itself the battle, Kirsten. And so I tell women all the time, you can have the beautiful and meaningful and confident life that you want, as long as you're willing to pay the price of discipline. Wow. Because if not, you could pretend to be confident because of the external, but that's fleeting. They'll go. Yeah. This is why women feel like they need to lose 30 pounds after their first baby, or they feel insecure because all of a sudden they're pregnant and they don't look the way they did, because their confidence and the way they felt about themselves, how they're beautiful, was dependent on the external. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have to create a consistent understanding of confidence that comes from skill building, competency. Yeah. And it's available to everyone, And I'll ask you this. How would you define a beautiful woman?
That's a good question. I would define a beautiful woman as someone that is fully herself and fully comfortable in her own skin that builds up others around her. Yeah, I mean, I could probably flesh it out more, but since I tend to be long-winded, I'll keep it at that.
But isn't that hard though? Isn't that funny though? It's like, because 99.9% of women don't believe they're beautiful. I mean, this is a crisis. Think about it. Like, you live probably in an industry that only really reveals part of a woman's beauty, only the physical, only what she looks like. And it tells the rest of the world, it wires subconsciously the rest of the world that they're not beautiful simply because Hollywood is only advertising part of what makes a woman beautiful, the external, right? And so if you think about a beautiful sunset, you look at the sunset, if you think of beautiful art, you can't even pinpoint it. You can't say, I think it's the cloud to the right. I think it's that. But if you think about it, something beautiful cannot even be described. It's an experience. Wow. Think of an art. Think of the sunset. You can't put your finger on it, but it changes you. Something about that painting, about that music, about that acting, the art, that something so beautiful that you are left with an imprint that inspires you. Let's bring that definition to a beautiful woman. Wow. What is a beautiful woman, Kirsten? She's somebody that inspires the world to be better because she is becoming better. That it's not just what she looks like, it's not just what she's speaking, it's actually an integrated experience where every encounter with her, you are never the same again. Wow. Can we then redefine a beautiful woman so that every woman has the capacity to believe and is capable of seeing herself as that person? Because we can train to be that woman. We can learn to think, to speak, to show up, to discipline ourselves to the point where we are breathing life to the people around us. Wow, yeah. That the very encounter itself changes the people around us. That is what women deeply desire. So I tell women, do you want to be beautiful? Based on that definition, they're just struck because deep down in their heart, they would say, yes, I could, but I don't know if I could ever be that woman. Wow. And I tell them, yes, you can. We'll show you how. Yeah. It's a matter of training. Mm-hmm. It's available to all of us.
Wow. I have like full chills. It's so true. I think a lot of times when I meet people that, you just feel, and honestly, even this conversation, like the feeling that I'm feeling is how I would describe like what you just said, and I think it's like, it's the feeling of being inspired. It's the feeling of just leaving and feeling a little lighter and better about yourself. And it's like, I've realized there's been countless people that I've had that experience, and it makes you stop and think, especially in a world where today more than ever, like people are so stressed out. People are so divided and selfish. And I think when you leave feeling like a little bit lighter from an interaction with someone, I'm always like, what was it about that person? And it's beauty, like it's a beautiful thing to have that. So I think it's really powerful to articulate the definition of beauty that way. And I think that we would have a lot more of a beautiful world if we could all live those types of lives.
Yeah, or we can train women to be able to have that access. I think I just think it's time, and I just want to thank you because I think that you're a beautiful soul, sincerely. Not only are you just, your radiant smile and you can see it, but I can experience also your genuineness, Kirsten, and also your deep desire to live a life that's full. Actually, wholeness, as we define it in the Women's School, is to be fully alive and growing in harmony with your original design, that very thing you were created for. So, I admire you for pursuing your dreams in spite the battle probably and where you are of comparison, competition, whatever, you're doing, and that somehow you've carried that dream as a child with you and you're doing it and you're inspiring. I mean, just to think of the work that you've done even with the human trafficking, and I'm thinking, wow, the burden of the work of having to fight that kind of battle, it's not a light, it's not a light battle. And yet you're choosing to do it. You're fighting for it in your unique DNA, unique essence, is what your coach is saying. And so I just want to honor you. And I just think that the world is better because of you.
Thank you. And likewise, I just want to flip that back to you. I think, what you were saying of, like you have this beautiful full life, you have 8 kids, like you don't have to be doing the work that you're doing, but that feeling of when you overhear people degrading themselves and others in Starbucks and beating themselves up, it's like, I can't not do something about this. Like, that's how I feel about the human trafficking work. Like I had a series of experiences where I was like, okay, this isn't coincidental anymore. Like I think that God is telling me to do something about this, and it's what fuels me. And I just think, like anyone listening, I've found that the thing and that fuel and the dream and the purpose that keeps me going is always related to what breaks my heart, and what breaks my heart, because I want there to be healing in the world for that thing. And so for me, it's human trafficking, and even going back to women empowerment, like the two kind of go hand in hand, as we were talking about before we started recording this. It's like traffickers come in and they groom these victims because they're vulnerable, because they don't have that sense of self-worth because of a multitude of different factors in their upbringing. There's a reason why foster kids are the #1 trafficked group of individuals in the United States. And so I think that this work extends, like that's why the work, and I want to honor you because the work that you're doing is so important, because so much of prevention of human trafficking really is just providing the resources, not only like physically to these individuals in need, but also equipping them and what their self-value is, and even looking at like the society, and this is a completely different podcast, but our society and like what we define, how we sexualize girls from a young age, like how we train men to talk to women, like it's all connected. Everything is so connected when you really strip it away. And so the work that I do is dependent on the work that you do, and anyone listening, like the work you do is also integrated in all of this. And so I think that like finding that one thing that breaks your heart, that's been the fuel for me, at least.
It has been for me. I said my wound has become my compass to my contribution. It really has. The things that break our heart, if we ponder it, probably is where perhaps we're called to. And I say that, we don't just empower women, we have to equip her with the skills. Because I think that the more we equip them, the more they are less at risk of being groomed, of knowing their value, and giving them the script to say no and draw firm boundaries and be strategic even about the way they show up in these situations so that they're not vulnerable. I mean, these are equipment tools. So we can't just leave it at empowerment and say, yeah, we have to do the grunt work. And when I tell women all the time, I'm like, well, the secret to a beautiful life is a woman hard at work on her discipline. And this is when everybody's like, oh, okay, I don't want to do it January. I'm like, well, there is no other way. We have to equip ourselves. And it looks like skill after skill and training after training. But what else, But if we don't, then we risk our entire life.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I can keep talking to you forever, as I said, but, I want to be respectful of your time, and I kind of just want to wrap this up. And like one of the questions that I always ask people on this podcast is, the name of the podcast, as I've said, is Imperfect because of, my recovering perfectionism. But I've realized that the OCD, which I was so ashamed of for a while, actually, when I've learned how to deal with it, is become a strength of mine, because it's what allows me to be really focused. It's what allows me to pay attention to details and things that are really important for the work that I'm doing. And so I think that when you learn to embrace these imperfections, which are really just part of who you were created to be, part of God's design for you, like God created me with the brain that he did for a reason, and learning how to embrace that and work with it then can become your superpower. And so I always ask people, what is the imperfection that you are most proud of?
Okay, I'm just going to say it, and I think it's Barbie. At 16, I got pregnant and didn't know how to say no to myself, didn't know I really didn't know what was going on. I was young and innocent, and I had an abortion. And it was in the process of actually wanting to date, broke up with the only boyfriend I had. I didn't know how to say no to him. I felt bad. It was my lack of skill set. And then 3 months later, I get pregnant again. The same guy, my only boyfriend. And I was dead. I was a walking dead. When I tell you that I met, a mentor who trained me and said, "Journey, let's design you," it was because I was physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally dead. That became the compass to why I do what I do. Because I was a good girl who was never shown how and made bad choices, suffered for it. But our wounds become our greatest gift. Yeah. And this is why I'm here.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I know that it's cost something to share that, but I know that someone listening to this like needs to hear that. And again, I just want to honor you for, who you are and what you do. And, like the past is the past, but you're allowing it to propel you into what you're doing and impacting so many people. So thank you for sharing that.
I know I'm not alone, and that's why I it took me a while to be able to share something that vulnerable, so specific because I had children. But we can't collapse our failure with being a failure.
Absolutely. And I know this is probably going to be a tough question, but if you could leave listeners with one thing, what would it be?
Make a decision to train yourself on a journey to becoming who you really want to be, not what everyone else thinks you should be. Go into an interior journey and find your tribe of women that's going to help you train yourself and help you design every part of your life, because you only have this life and you don't know what tomorrow is. And there's a hole in the tapestry of the world if you do not give what you are called to contribute in the world. Wow. And it requires us to train so that we can give fully who we are created to be.
It's amazing. That is such a good way to end this. And like I said, you have so much wisdom where I could keep asking you questions for so long, but I also know that you have an entire school and resources for that. So where can people find you and connect with you and the Women's School?
Yeah, so you can go to thewomenschool.com and you can learn about our courses. I would invite everybody to our foundational course. Is the Women's School Masterclass, and that is where we teach women how to dream. We teach women mindset and skill set, the foundation, and then we teach them how to design every part of their life. We do it very intentionally and very strategically using formulas. And so I tell women, this is a foundation we needed growing up. It was a foundation I needed it. And so I invite you, because I think that's you fighting for you. You're the first woman you fight for. And so let's fill our cup, let's train, and that's the foundational course. And then we can build from there. And that's how you can find us in thewomenschool.com. I am your primary teachers, but we've got, thousands of students all over the world. We're in 40 countries. And we have strategists, which we call our wholeness coaches, that also are trained to help you design every part of your arena. Teaches women to actually discover the dream of the season, because there's a dream every season. It's not one dream, it's every season. And then help them to develop the discipline necessary to achieve both the dream and the design. And that's what our wholeness coaches do. We'll call them a strategist, because they have to be strategic. So that's where you can find us. You can find us into thewomenschool.com if you want a training on how to design your life, but then the wholeness coaching school if you want to be able to be coached by a strategist to help you design every part of your life as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, January, for just sharing your wealth of wisdom. And I know, like I said earlier, I've been impacted by this conversation. So I really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.